Here we go. Our next chapter of Lois Lowry's The Willoughbys. Chapter 19, Long Hours in the Laboratory. Commander Melinoff, whose life was greatly changed now that he had Nanny to tend to Ruth, began to spend hours each day in the experimental laboratory in one of the mansion's turrets. He had always been the happiest in the lab, where he could mix and measure and taste things in his ongoing search for the next hugely successful candy. The thing that would rival Lickety-Twist and add more billions to his fortune. He had to admit privately that it was easier to do his experiments with his wife still buried in the avalanche, and now clearly long, he sniffed at the thought, dead. She had insisted on tidying the lab all the time, and every time he thought he had come close, had been very near to the kind of perfection he sought. Just the right combination of nuts and chocolate and caramel and marshmallow and raisins. He would return eagerly the next morning and find it all gone. The containers washed and dried and put away, bowls to the left of the cartons, pans before pots, stirring spoons arranged by size, and his scribbled notes about the proportions taken out with the trash. With a sigh, he would begin again, measuring, stirring, simmering, tasting, but his efforts all seemed doomed. And then, of course, with the avalanche tragedy, he had lost his enthusiasm. The utensils in the lab had gathered dust for years, and now, with renewed vigor, he washed everything, unpacked new ingredients, and began again. And carefully he melted and measured some chocolate. Though he closed the door of the lab, he could hear the cheerful, busy sounds of the household, the children playing, Nanny scrubbing and cooking, baby Ruth giggling in her playpen, the cats, for the Willoughby cat had made friends quite quickly with the Melinoff cat, leaping around and pouncing on imaginary mice. Happily, he chopped some nuts, he added them to the chocolate, dipped a finger for taste, thought it over, and decided that it had been a mistake. He remembered now that chocolate should coat the outside of the candy bar, and the nuts should be mixed in the caramel on the inside. Threw away the chocolate and nuts mixture and began again. Below, downstairs, he heard the oven timer in the kitchen making its buzzing signal. He could picture Nanny in her flowered apron leaning down and opening the oven door to peer inside at whatever fine-smelling thing she was cooking for dinner. Oh, if he were not such a decent man, he might be tempted to pat her large behind affectionately as she bent over. Shaking his head to rid it of such an improper thought, he stirred the freshly melted chocolate and set it aside. In another pan, he began to warm and soften some caramel. Again, he picked up his chopping knife and went to work on some walnuts, and then when they were reduced into small bits, he sprinkled them into the warm caramel, dipped in a finger, and tasted. No, he thought, they should be pecans, not walnuts. He sighed, but it was not a sigh of frustration. It was more a little breath of happiness and creativity, combined slightly with the thought of Nanny below in the kitchen, and he began again. Of course, he thought, although the perfect combination of ingredients was essential, still, he had, as he explained it to the children, he would need the perfect name for this new confection. He would have it printed in blue, he thought. No, red. He would have it printed in large red letters on the wrappers of the candy bar. Choconut? No. Pecan or choc? Silly names. He dismissed them in his mind and began chopping pecans. The name didn't need to contain the ingredients, he realized. His previous success had started with the mention of the act of eating, lick, and had become Lickety-Twist. This candy bar, with all its caramel, would involve chewing. Chew, he thought. Chewy gooey. That had a ring to it. He pictured it in his mind, children at the candy counter. I want a chewy gooey. I want 3 chewy gooeys, he could imagine with eagerness, which with buyers would place their orders. He frowned and poured the chopped pecans into the fresh pan of melted caramel. Maybe it wasn't really a good idea to refer to gooiness. It might make parents nervous, and they would think about cavities and dental bills. From below he could hear happy laughter. Nanny, cheerful sing-song voice, pat a cake, baker's man. He pictured her softly clapping her hands, and he imagined the infant's delighted smile. Sweet child, his baby Ruth.